It's a Guy Jeans podcast.
Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for being on my podcast, man.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure.
So where are you right now?
So I live in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, okay. And is that where your business is and everything?
Yeah, so we're kind of I guess more of a national online presence, but yeah, we kind of travel all over to do everything. But this is where I'm based of for now, and then in the summer in July I'll be moving to Washington D.C. For a year or two. So. Oh
wow! And so tell me about your business.
I'm the founder and CEO of Harvesting Nature, which is a outdoor educational and media platform. So we focus on providing education, inspiration for people who want to live the lifestyle of like hunting, fishing, foraging for food.
Yeah.
We do that via our website, which has, close to 1,000 recipes on it and articles like how-to stuff, anywhere from like, how do I go turkey hunting to trout fishing to, cooking, simple recipes or very advanced recipes. And then we do, I've got a podcast myself called the Wild Fishing Game Podcast.
Yeah.
And then, we've got our own spice blends, which are tailored towards big game, small game, upland fowl, waterfowl, things like that. And then we do in-person hunting, fishing, foraging camps where we kind of walk people through the entirety of the process of learning how to shoot, learning how to go out and hunt, butcher, process, and then cook, whatever species we're targeting in that particular camp. But all around just trying to do some good in the world and get more people out hunting and fishing for food.
I was checking out your website, and that wild pig hunting culinary camp looks awesome, man. You go there and you learn all that stuff in one setting, huh?
Yeah, it's an experience. Like, people get there on Thursday, and we get a mixed amount of experience in there. Whether people are just coming for, they've never shot a gun before and this is the first time they're going out hunting, or, they've been hunting for years and have just never clued into the butchering part or the cooking part. And really, it's awesome because we've done now 4 camps, and I love seeing just like that aha moment where people they're like, oh my gosh, this is what wild pig tastes like. Like, this is amazing. Like, I can't wait, to go back home and share this with my friends and family. So
yeah,
it's a cool experience.
What is the benefit? This is a totally dumb question to you, but like, what, for the people that don't know, what's the benefit of, cooking and catching wild game compared to like the, store-bought food and all that?
So I think a couple different thoughts on that.
Yeah.
The first being is you get that reconnection with sort of like a very natural way of life for us. We had industrial agriculture emerge in the 1900s and like kind of run rampant and catch up with the supply and demand of population growth. But I think the people that have seen a lot of the benefit out of wild game, have traditionally, it's been consumed throughout cultures all over, both fish, game, forageables, all that.
Yeah.
And I think as you look at it as a food source, like it's nutrient dense, which is good. So you're getting more vitamins, you're getting more minerals. It's less bad fats there. Mm-hmm. You're able to eat something that's very natural and unprocessed. And then I say just too, like that reconnection with the land and getting to see the process of your food really go from the field all the way to your household. Mm-hmm. And I know for me personally, like, I take pride in that because, I serve my friends and my family wild game, and, there's a certain amount of trust that we place in the commercial agriculture system. And not to say anything bad about, every farmer out there. Like, I come from an agriculture family myself, but like, there are definitely some questionable practices and policies and things like that. And I think for a lot of folks that are looking to sort of take things into their own hand and confront food security issues that, we saw during COVID and times like that, where you go to the grocery store and there may or may not be meat in the cooler. I think folks that had a freezer full of wild game were much more comfortable in that time period.
Yeah. Were you a vet, or are you a vet?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm actually still active duty.
Oh, are you?
In the Coast Guard? Yep.
And so, do you take like vets to do these camps and stuff like that for like
We
get them
do.
outdoors? Yeah.
Yeah, we do work some with that, and then for a while I sat on the national board for the Armed Forces Initiative with the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and we partnered with them on some projects and are looking to continue that. But yeah, we're looking at really growing our camp and scaling the way we're doing it, and open up opportunities to folks who may not have access to it, veterans, folks from communities that don't traditionally hunt, things like that. So yeah, those are all opportunities out there.
Are you taking folks that were in combat situations and they have PTSD and taking them out there and working with those kind of folks?
We have some, I think, more on like the AFI side with backcountry hunters and anglers, that they've definitely gone through some of those initiatives and worked that. But as far as harvesting nature itself, like we haven't specifically worked with veterans that have had those experiences in particular. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about like I see you like do turkey and pig and deer and fish and all these things, and you're an amazing chef, it sounds like. And so how did you tell me about your background with cooking and how did you get into that?
So I grew up. So I'm from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. So grew up in a native family and native culture in Southeast Oklahoma, and wild game's pretty ingrained in our culture, and grew up deer hunting and fishing and all that stuff. And some of my very early memories are like cooking with my grandmother and like hunting and fishing with my grandfather. So those are all kind of like laid a good baseline. And then I went off to college down to New Orleans and started my studies there. And about midway through college, started working in restaurants, working for catering, and then later in restaurants, and happened to wander into some really, really good restaurants and got to learn a lot of really good skills that I took forth, both to the West Coast and cooked a little bit in San Diego. And then I cooked some down. My last restaurant was in 2020 down in the Florida Keys. And then, I've continued really since like 2011 or so writing. But I think it was once I got out of college, I realized that, I could take my passion for cooking and couple it with my passion for the outdoors. And this was at the beginning of, Hank Shaw was very popular at the time. Steve Rinella was just getting his first show on the Travel Channel back then. And, there was like all kinds of movement in this wild food space. And I was like, I kind of want to do that too. And so that's kind of what led me to create Harvesting Nature back then is it was more of a personal outlet for me to just write about my experiences, write about cooking wild food. And then, years later, it evolved into like this kind of community, which we've continued to just interact with folks. But the restaurant world, taught me a lot. It laid a good foundation to help me start writing recipes and things like that, more confidently, and the techniques and learning to use different ingredients and looking at food and saying, well, we can take a dish and instead of beef, I can substitute venison. I just have to do a couple little things different because the meat's, less fat, it's more lean. So I think those enabled me to kind of be where I'm at. And I love the restaurant world. I miss it some days, and some days I'm glad I'm not there. But it's it was an awesome experience.
And you've written some recipe books, right?
Yep. So in 2017, I published my first book.
It's awesome.
Called Eat Wild Game. Very formal title.
Boom.
Yeah, and it was great. It was a good like first project for me. I think looking back on it now, I was like, man, I'd like to go back and like polish it up a little bit. But it's a lot of my favorite recipes that I just accumulated over a couple years and threw together in a book and put it out there. I didn't go the traditional publishing route. I just did it self-published, so it's not
nice.
You won't see it in many bookstores or things like that, but it's out there. And then last year we published like a kids picture book. It was like it's called Wild Game A to Z, and it's just got like for every letter of the alphabet, it's got a wild game animal, and it's very colorful, and it's got the sounds each animal makes like phonetically, so you can, practice with kids and stuff. It's just a cool little tool. Nice,
man. Okay, so let's talk about recipes. I'm assuming I'm in the music biz as well, and I'm a songwriter, and I'm assuming that it's kind of artistic in that you're like creating something and hoping that people will like it. It sounds very similar to songwriting, right? So how do you come up with a recipe for all these different game animals?
Well, I think so. Part of it, I definitely won't take all the credit. So, I would say a little less than half of the recipes on the website are mine. Like, we've had a big community of writers that contribute to it. But as far as me personally, it can be something is like I'm out at a restaurant, or I'm out, eating, or at the grocery store shopping, or in an international market or something, and I see an ingredient that I want to use, and I think about, well, how does this pair with wild game? And I love wild game for the fact that when you're thinking about food pairings, if you look traditionally at like domestic pork or domestic chicken or even beef in that sense, like you can cook something with it that will overpower the natural flavors of the meat. And I think my goal with wild game is to sort of enhance the flavors. So, people use the word gamey, and I'll say like, that's a bad word for me. I don't try to use the word gamey at all, but like you want to, instead of it being gamey, you want it to be something that you enjoy. So you look for flavors that you can pair with it. Well, the great thing about game meat is they're usually like big, bold flavors. So a lot of times you can pair big, bold, ingredients with it. And I think a lot of like spices and sauces and things like that go well. And then too, just like everyday stuff that you can think of, like comfort food. As long as you're looking at sort of preparing it in a way where you're not going to dry out the meat or you're not going to overcook it, those are the way it goes. But really, it just starts with, a smell, a reminder, an ingredient, or like I may go to, have dinner at a Chinese restaurant, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I really want to try to make like some sort of dim sum with some wild game, and just kind of like go down a rabbit hole of like, one, has this ever been done before? And two, like, how do I do it? And I just kind of like almost build the airplane as I'm flying it, for lack of a better term. And it just sort of like comes together, and you tweak it a little bit. And then, after one or two iterations of the recipe, we'll generally publish it out, and, photographs and all that, and get it out there for everybody to enjoy.
When you're in a restaurant and you're, the chef and everything, and you're, pumping out these dishes and stuff, do people come back and go, dude, that was insane. That tasted incredible. Like, are they super stoked on it?
Yeah.
That's cool.
To me, seeing like the smile on somebody's face, like once they eat, take that first bite, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is really, really good. And then they just kind of continue on with it. I think that is always, as a chef and a cook, been like the highlight for me, is just seeing people being like, oh, this is it.
Yeah. That's cool. What's the difference between a wild turkey and a store-bought turkey taste-wise?
I think taste-wise, so you're right off the bat, your wild turkeys are going to be leaner.
Okay.
So they're a little bit easier to like dry out when you cook, because also too, whenever wild or farm-raised turkeys are processed, they're generally injected with like a brine. So that's a mixture of salt and water, and that's like kind of helps them stay juicy during the process of cooking. But what we sort of teach folks when we're talking about wild turkey is, everybody thinks about this like quintessential like roasted turkey from the oven, like it's super phenomenal, and you think Thanksgiving dinner and you're cutting it, and like likely I wouldn't recommend doing that with a wild bird wild turkey, because you've got different types of meat. You've got white meat, you've got dark meat,
Yeah.
you've got sort of the absence of fat in there, so it's a little easier to dry out. So when you roast it like that, you can have a tendency to dry out one part maybe undercooked and all that. So we typically have folks, separate the breasts out from the bird, and then the legs and thighs, and you get this really like kind of a more bolder flavor out of the legs and thighs, which is great. So think like shredded meat or pulled apart meat for like carnitas, or pulled meat sandwiches with barbecue sauce, or like soup. There's like so many things you can do with it.
Yum.
But you got to cook it to where it's like gets where you can shred it, and that pairs really well with a lot of really bold flavors. And then like the lighter meat, like from the breast, we actually published a recipe today called wild turkey Kiev.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, actually.
Yeah, it's a traditional recipe that comes out of Eastern Europe. There's some debate on where it comes from, but I think in the article, like, I attribute it to a particular, I think, hotel and restaurant in Kiev. And that, it's a very light meat, so you don't need a lot of flavors with it because it's already got good flavor. But if you put a lot of other flavors on top of it, you could overpower it, and then you just kind of get lost. Like, you wouldn't want to cover it in a bunch of curry or anything like that. So kind of the method we used there was you used butter on the inside. You make the butter and you freeze it, and then you pound the breast flat and roll it around the butter, and then you essentially roll it in breadcrumbs, and it's a combination of like frying and baking in order to get it really crispy. But then whenever you cut it, like the butter just like kind of oozes out, and oh my gosh,
it looks awesome. I'm looking at it right now. It looks kind of, I don't want to say egg roll, but like it has that kind of like crust around and then the turkey around the turkey meat, and then there's like some kind of herb coming out of it as well, like some kind of green herb. I'm not sure what that is. Yeah,
it's parsley and garlic cloves and chives on the inside with the butter.
Yeah, it looks awesome, man. You just eat that with your hand or what? Probably.
I'm civilized. I tried a fork and knife, but it's tempting to just pick it up and eat it like a sub sandwich for sure.
Yeah, that's what I would probably do. So at your camps, these people are shooting these wild pigs, right? And then you guys bring the pigs back, and then I saw that you guys like hang the pigs, and then you guys go through like how to butcher them, I guess, right?
Yeah, so once we get them back, like everything's hands-on. So we do a couple classes with the folks during the day in between hunting times.
Yeah.
And so they get to see everything. So it's kind of like the walk, crawl, run mentality of like, hey, we're going to talk about this, then we're going to show it to you, and then we're going to be there right next to you as you do it to answer any questions and help you out. Okay. But the goal is for people to walk away with those skills that they can transfer over into any wild game animal. Because when you come down to like some very basic butchering fundamentals, it's the same, whether it's a pig or it's a deer or an elk or all that. You're just dealing with a difference of size.
Right.
But yeah, it's super hands-on. Like they're gutting the animal, they're skinning it, they're breaking it down into quarters, they're breaking down the quarters into different cuts, and we teach them like what each cut's good for when you cook it and all that stuff like that. And then they're actually doing a cooking class while they're there.
That's cool, man. Out here in California, we have the wild pigs, and from what I understand, they're brought over, I think, from Russia or something. Have you heard that? Or they're not native, but they're running in the foothills all over in California and stuff. What are you getting these pigs at, or where are you guys hunting pigs at?
So we go down to Texas and get them. So we've got like a couple different populations. I think like epicenters for pig population in the United States. Like the majority of the pigs that are here in the U.S. were brought over, can trace their lineage back to like the Spaniards. Oh, okay. Essentially, there's a few pockets, I think, in like Georgia area, and then up in New England where there's some Russian descendants that were brought over and released. But the majority of pigs that were here came over. You had like DeSoto and all those conquistadors marching with their big entourages, and they would essentially just have like this, gaggle of pigs behind them, and occasionally the pig would wander off, and occasionally would go here. Well, we learned over time, like, pigs are really adaptable, and they were able to, take on any terrain, and now they're even seeing them get up into Canada with what they're calling like the super pig that can survive the winters and all that stuff. So it's pretty wild, but I think as a food source, they're ideal, because in most states that have them, that they are invasive. There's very lax regulations on hunting them. You can hunt them year round. You cook the meat. It's clean meat. It tastes good. It's all that stuff. So we really try to promote it for that aspect of being like, we want to have a really good quality meat that people can work with, but that's also readily available for us to do these camps with.
That's awesome, man. Are you guys finding that there's like too many of them, and so it's good to hunt them, kind of a thing?
Oh yeah. They're. I mean, I think the population in Texas alone is like 12 million or something like astronomical.
Wow.
Yeah, and they just they decimate farmlands.
Yeah.
They will prey on game birds that live on the ground. They'll eat eggs. They do all kinds of damage to natural habitat as well as like farmland as well. So as much of a dent as we can make, which isn't much as hunters, we I feel like it's our responsibility to kind of do our part. And man, you know what? They taste great.
Do they? I don't think I've ever had any.
They taste so good.
Yeah.
It tastes so good.
Well, I'm sure you cooking them, I'm sure they taste amazing. That's pretty cool. What about this like snowy goose too? I heard something like there's too many of them.
Yeah, so snow geese, they're definitely overpopulated. So not an invasive species, just overpopulated. And back kind of in the 1990s, they realized the population in the Arctic was getting too high. So they migrate like kind of big swaths to like the southern part of the U.S. and then they head all the way up and they nest and stuff in the Arctic. Well, you had a couple factors going on with that. The agricultural growth up in Canada and those regions kind of grew. So the geese weren't returning to their traditional like nesting grounds. And then to hunting of predators in that area. So like Arctic fox, other animals like that traditionally preyed on those birds and their young and stuff and kind of helped the population stay in check. So what you ended up with was these snow geese populations settling on agriculture fields and just like kind of chilling out and eating. Well, they went from, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but like a couple million to like several million.
Oh my God.
So much so that it alarmed U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Canadian wildlife agencies and all that. And so that's when you started seeing these conservation orders go up in the spring that essentially would create really high limits for you to shoot in a day or eliminate the limits altogether. And so we do our snow goose camp in Missouri. And if you Google snow geese, and you'll see this picture of like all these like thousands of snow geese in this picture. Yeah. That's usually taken from a reservoir there in Missouri next to where we hunt at. And I tell you, being in the pit and looking up and seeing all the geese flying over, have you ever seen like the World War II movies or the old footage of where they just have all these bombers stacked on top of each other? Yeah. Like, that to me was what it was like. There was just so many snow geese. Yeah. And so we use that as a camp as well. And it's really like we get folks out skeet shooting so they're comfortable with a shotgun. Then we get them out in the blind and then they're hunting. And, the place we hunt at, like they harvest anywhere from 30 to, 100 plus geese a day. And then what we do is we take the folks back to the camp and we teach them how to clean all the birds and butcher them and package them up. And then we're eating snow goose all weekend long. Like it's really good because I think traditionally, as much as people hunt the geese, as many people will tell you they aren't edible. And I completely disagree.
Oh, really?
And they're so good.
How do you cook them, or what do you do?
Well, I mean, like the breasts.
Yeah, like, yeah. What do you do like when you cook a snow goose?
So similar, like I was talking to you about turkey. So we kind of break it out. You get the breasts separate, you get the legs separate, you get the thighs separate. And each one of those you kind of do something different with. The breasts, think of like a grass-fed beef is very equivalent to what the flavor is.
Okay.
And the breasts are pretty tender, so you can sear those on like high heat and serve them with some sort of sauce. I'm trying to think what I did the other day. Use some spice blend. And just served them up just like cubed on the grill, and then the legs and thighs traditionally would probably braise those or put them in a crock pot or slow cooker with maybe some liquid, some broth or some beer and some seasoning, and just get them all like pulled apart off the bone till they're super tender.
Sounds
and
good.
And really, like tacos or sandwiches are probably my go-to for those. But yeah, it's you can't go wrong, and the flavor is really, really good.
Back to the blinds, there's a picture I saw, and everybody's wearing white, right? Like they're in the snow, and they're in the blinds, and it looks like there's snow on the ground.
Yep. Yeah. So there's still, there wasn't as much this year when we were up there. You know, it was pretty mild winter for much of the U.S. this year. So we didn't have a lot of snow. It did snow several times. It was really cold, but it's common for snow to be on the ground. But you're sitting in this pit blind, which is like set down in the ground.
Yeah.
And there's all these like hundreds of snow goose decoys around you, which are white. And so you're just kind of wearing a mix of like camouflage and white and things like that kind of blend in with the surroundings, because the geese pick up on the movement, like as they're flying over to kind of decide whether or not they're going to land. Like they'll pick up on little movements, and so if you're wearing, you know, like a baseball cap, something different colored, and a blue t-shirt, like they may pick up on that versus like white and camo and things like that.
Okay, interesting. You have your own spices too.
We do.
That's crazy, man. So how do you make all this? I'm looking at them right now. Wild fish blend, upland fowl blend, waterfowl blend, small game blend, wild fungi blend. That's awesome.
Yeah, the wild fungi. Thank you. The wild fungi is our newest one. We just released that a couple weeks ago, and that's really for like mushrooms and wild mushrooms. We're like in prime mushroom season right now, getting into it. So we wanted to roll that out, and it's a good blend of like parsley and garlic and rosemary and a bunch of other spices that we paired and designed for mushrooms. And then kind of similar to all the other blends, we designed the blends, picked out from a bunch of different styles that we liked. And then we work with a partner in New Jersey that mixes them all for us. So it's all U.S. made and really quality stuff. They don't put any fillers or any preservatives in it, and all very low sodium or no sodium. So like our waterfowl blend and our fungi blend have no salt at all. And I think for me that was important from like a chef standpoint, because I don't want to control people's salt level. I want them to be able to do that. I think that plays in. You know, you get a lot of these blends you go buy from the grocery store or whatever, and they're super, super salty. Yeah. And it just kind of like detracts, because then you can't get a good flavor. But this stuff, you can like roll your meat in it, and you're like, oh my God, this tastes so good. Nice. When
you guys go, you actually go out and like go mushroom hunting and get the mushrooms?
Yeah, we're waiting for some of the snow to finish up melting, and things are just kind of starting to pop off here in Colorado. But I know in other places I've been watching, like social media, like Oklahoma, Illinois, some of the parts in the South, they're all starting to get morel mushrooms, which are pretty big, and then they'll, subsequent other species of mushrooms will kind of start to follow as well.
Dude, what about like, you have to be careful. Isn't like some of the mushrooms kind of, like toxic, or, like some of those hallucinogenic type mushrooms? I mean, those are mixed in there. You have to be careful, right?
I try to stick to like the ones that I really know or am really comfortable that I know, and I don't venture out. And I encourage that anybody that's interested in foraging, like there's tons of Facebook groups that have good info on it. There's, buy some books, reference some books, do some digging, but like don't ever eat it until you're fully comfortable in knowing what it is. And to me, that's like a system of checks. Like I've got some friends that are mushroom people, and I'm like, hey, does this look like this mushroom? And they'll send me some feedback, and I'll double check in some like online references or some books, and then I'll maybe post in some of these social media groups and kind of just get a good feeling and make sure that I'm like fully comfortable before I eat it. Because there's definitely there's some out there that'll kill you. There's a lot out there that'll make you sick and like all those things. So we just try to like be confident, which is also intimidating too, because you're like, ugh.
So I want to let people know you have 2 podcasts or one.
We do have, we just sunset our Antler and Fin podcast. So it was more like a food history, and we sunset it as its own individual podcast, and we brought it back under our main podcast, which is called the Wild Fish and Game podcast. Okay. And so it'll be like a monthly segment on there, where that one's kind of cool because we take like a dish we've prepared. So like the wild turkey Kiev, like we would take that and Adam would go back and he'd talk about the food history with the dish and it's all this other stuff. Cool. And then he'd like walk you through kind of how to prepare it. And then the rest of our podcast is focused on, we're doing a butchering segment right now. So we're going through all the different cuts on an animal. We're talking about like the nuances with it, how to remove it from the animal, what you can do when you cook it, like what you expect from it. And then we talk about some recipes specifically for it. So we're about, I think, 80% through a big game animal right now. And then we have like guests and stuff on too, for those in like the food spaces. We've got upcoming episode with Sean Sherman. So he's the sous chef out of Minnesota. He's a Sioux is from the tribe, I think Lakota Sioux from up in the Dakotas. But he's done a bunch of work with the Native American foods and the revival of like some traditional foods and modern methods and stuff. So I'm going to get him on the show and kind of pick his brain. We've talk with Jesse Griffiths, who just released a book called The Turkey Book that kind of like walks through cooking wild turkey. And we just kind of have a good group of people that we reach out to and chat with about hunting and fishing and foraging and cooking everything. We've had fun with it. We've been doing it since 2019. So we're a lot of episodes if you want to go back and listen, if you got a long drive or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, what a meal, or I should say, like what a food source like buffalo was for the Native Americans, huh? What a huge. I mean, they used so much of that. I mean, they used everything, right? Of the buffalo, big food source, big culturally important item. Ranging from everything from clothing to housing to transporting other foods, and then just the ability to eat the meat throughout the year, was pretty phenomenal. I know, that's good. So what about YouTube? Do you have anything going on YouTube?
We do have, we've got a YouTube channel. So our podcast gets put on there. We've done, we've got a few segments that we did for a TV show called The Sporting Chef last year. So some of those are on there as well. But we don't do too much on there, but we've been looking to grow. We've got some things in the works, but I would say if folks are interested, go give it a follow and just stand by for the goodness. Yeah.
And if people want to find you, it's harvestingnature.com.
Yep, harvestingnature.com. And then on just about any social media platform, you can just search for Harvesting Nature. We do a lot on Instagram and on Facebook, so we're pretty active there.
When is the next wild food camp?
So we've got a couple in the works for the fall that we haven't finalized yet. Okay. But our next pig camp, which is available on the websites, I think the first weekend in December, and then we've got the snow goose camp for 2025. I think it's February 20th through the 23rd. Yeah. And that both of those are available up on the website if you want to sign up. They tend to start selling out pretty quick when we're about 6 months out. So we're like getting to that mark where folks are going to start really paying attention and get their seats. So if you're interested, I encourage you to get over there and grab your spot.
Do people come from all over the place for those?
Everywhere.
That's awesome. That's so cool, man. That's really cool. Well, Justin, what a great podcast, man. I learned a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me on and for chatting. Let me share my story.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, I'll make sure to put all your information in the description and all that. And so, thanks again, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right, thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
It's a Guy Jeans podcast.